The sky above New Terra darkened with the arrival of the Empire's fleet. Not a natural darkness, but an artificial eclipse. Monolithic dreadnoughts blocking out the twin suns, their hulls adorned with the sigils of conquest. The air shuddered with the low hum of gravitational engines, and a cold, metallic scent settled over the colony. In the planetary capital of Arcadia Prime, the council chamber was silent as they watched the Imperial envoy descend. The delegation landed in a sleek obsidian vessel, a sharp contrast to the pale marble of the human structures. From the ship emerged Zyros Kane, Supreme Executor of the Galactic Empire's subjugation forces. He strode forward, a figure of chilling authority, his deep blue robes flowing behind him. His pale, elongated face bore no expression of malice, only certainty. Across from him stood Chancellor Miriam Voss, leader of the colony, her weathered features set with defiance. At her side was General Elias Drake, his muscular frame clad in combat armor, a silent pillar of resistance. The air between the two parties crackled with unspoken hostilities, the weight of history pressing upon them. Zyros Kane's voice was soft, yet it carried through the chamber like a blade through flesh. Humanity persists in its arrogance. You were granted a place in the Empire's fold. You have refused. There will be no further warnings. Miriam Voss held his gaze, her knuckles white against the smooth surface of the negotiation table. New Terra is free. We owe the Empire nothing. Kane exhaled, the motion almost mechanical. Freedom, he echoed. A primitive concept, clung to by species that do not understand the order of existence. Very well. The consequences will be absolute. The air grew heavy, an unspoken dread settling into the room. Drake took a step forward. You call this order? You slaughter, you enslave, you consume. We will not kneel. Kane regarded him with something akin to amusement. Then you will burn. With that, he turned, his delegation moving in perfect unison. Within moments they were gone, their ship ascending toward the sky. Silence filled the chamber, thick and suffocating. It was broken moments later by a transmission. The holoscreens flickered to life across the city, the image of Kane appearing larger than life. His voice resonated through every home, every street. The people of New Terra have chosen defiance. The sentence is carried out now. The first explosions shattered the sky. From orbit, the Empire's ships released their payload. Not fire, not traditional weapons, but something far worse. The nanite bombs dispersed in shimmering clouds, descending upon the cities with eerie grace. First, there was nothing. Then the screams began. Parents clutched at their children as their bodies convulsed, their skin graying, fracturing like dried earth. And then, in an instant, they were gone, reduced to dust carried away by an artificial wind. The streets of Arcadia Prime became graveyards of empty clothes and collapsed figures, the echoes of their final moments staining the air. Drake stood frozen, the image seared into his mind. The cries, the desperate grasping hands, the sheer, unrelenting horror. Then rage overtook him. He slammed his fist onto the table. Mobilize every unit, every ship. We fight. Voss's voice was hoarse. There's nothing left to fight for, Elias. Drake turned to her, his eyes blazing. Then we fight for vengeance. The days that followed were a blur of movement and grief. The Empire's forces remained in orbit, a silent reminder of their dominance. Yet the colony did not crumble. Grief turned to fury, and fury turned to purpose. The resistance that had long operated in the shadows now surged forward, a tide of defiance refusing to be broken. Drake took command. The underground networks, the hidden weapons caches, the silent whispers of rebellion, everything was activated. The loss of the children had not weakened them. It had forged them into something stronger. In the bowels of the Resistance's headquarters, a meeting was held. A holographic map of New Terra flickered before them, detailing every known Imperial outpost, every potential weak point. Drake stood at the helm, his voice a growl of determination. They think we are broken. They think this massacre has ended the fight. They are wrong. His words sparked something within the gathered fighters. Determination flared in their eyes, replacing the deadened grief. The plan took form, not to win, for they knew that was impossible, but to escape, to take what remained of humanity beyond the reach of the Empire, to disappear into the stars and return stronger. A whispered name emerged from the darkness. Cypher, a rogue AI, hidden deep within the planetary systems, capable of calculating escape routes through uncharted space. If they could reach it, they could find a way out. But the Empire would not let them go so easily. Drake knew that for every ship that would make it off-world, blood would be spilled. For every survivor that fled, 100 would fall. It was a cost he was willing to bear. The final moments of the meeting were not spent in words but in silence. Each fighter present knew what lay ahead. Each one accepted their fate. In the cold void above, Zyros Kane watched from the bridge of his dreadnought. Reports flowed in, pockets of resistance, whispers of escape plans. He was unmoved. Humanity did not understand. This was not war. This was extermination. He turned his gaze to the planet below, his lips forming the ghost of a smile. They could run. They could fight. But in the end, the Empire would always find them. The underground tunnels beneath Arcadia Prime pulsed with the quiet urgency of a world on the brink. The remnants of New Terra's people had taken refuge in the depths, away from the watchful eyes of the Empire's patrol ships. Dim emergency lights cast long shadows over the Resistance fighters gathered around a rusted tactical display, their faces gaunt with grief but hardened with purpose. General Elias Drake stood at the center of them, his broad frame rigid with controlled fury. His hands, calloused from decades of war, rested on the metal table as he studied the flickering map before him. Every major city on New Terra was occupied. The Empire's forces had spread like a disease, systematically dismantling every form of resistance. The people had lost their children. They would not lose their future. A figure stepped forward, Admiral Kira Voss, leader of the remnants of New Terra's fleet. Her sharp green eyes flickered with determination as she placed a small data drive onto the table. "We found it," she said. "Cypher exists." The room fell silent. Cypher had been a myth, a rogue AI buried deep within the planet's abandoned infrastructure, a remnant from the first settlers. It was said to be powerful enough to decrypt Imperial networks and calculate escape routes beyond charted space. If they could find it, they could carve a path through the enemy blockade and flee beyond the Empire's grasp. Drake's jaw tightened. "Where?" Voss exhaled. "Beneath the ruins of Eos Station." The name sent a chill through the room. Eos had once been New Terra's most advanced research facility before the Empire razed it to the ground. If Cypher was still there, it would be surrounded by ruins and death. Drake straightened. "We move at night. Assemble the team." The hours leading to the mission passed in restless silence. Fighters prepared weapons, engineers programmed escape coordinates, and medics readied supplies for the wounded they knew would come. Drake walked among them, offering nods where words failed. Every face he passed was a reminder of what had been lost. As the last preparations were made, a woman approached him. Layla Fawn, a communications expert and one of the few who had deciphered Cypher's initial signal. She hesitated before speaking. "Elias, there's something else." Drake studied her. "Go on." She handed him a decrypted transmission. It was brief but damning. "We have a traitor." The word struck like a blade. Layla continued. "The Empire knows about Cypher. Someone has been feeding them information. They'll be waiting." Drake exhaled slowly, forcing his fury into a controlled ember rather than an open flame. "We proceed anyway." The mission began under cover of darkness. The Resistance moved like ghosts through the skeletal remains of Eos Station, their footsteps soundless over broken metal and scorched earth. Overhead, Imperial patrol ships hovered, their searchlights sweeping through the ruins like hungry predators. Drake led the group, his rifle steady in his hands. The air was thick with the scent of charred stone, a grim reminder of what had been lost. As they reached the entrance to the underground vault, Voss knelt beside the control panel, her fingers dancing over the rusted interface. "Hurry," Drake urged. Voss gave him a sharp look but said nothing. The door hissed open, revealing a dark passage descending into the depths. They moved quickly, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive blackness. Then came the first shot. A single bolt of plasma struck the wall beside them, searing the metal with an eerie glow. In an instant, the ruins came alive with movement. Imperial forces emerged from the shadows, their white armored forms blending with the smoke and debris. "It's a trap," Layla shouted. Drake didn't need to be told twice. He fired, his shot striking the first soldier square in the chest. The resistance scattered, taking cover behind broken pillars and collapsed structures. The corridor echoed with the sharp crack of gunfire and the screams of the wounded. Voss and Layla worked furiously on a secondary control panel, trying to bypass the Imperial lockdown. Cypher was close, Drake could feel it. Then he saw him, a lone figure standing beyond the fray, untouched by the chaos. Dressed in the uniform of a resistance officer but flanked by 2 Imperial guards. The traitor. Drake's blood turned to ice. Lieutenant Aaron Hale. A man who had fought beside them for years, who had mourned with them, bled with them. And yet, here he stood, his loyalty given to the enemy. Drake's finger tightened on the trigger, but Hale moved first. He raised his wrist communicator and spoke 2 words. "Activate it." The ground trembled. From the depths of the ruins, a mechanical hum grew, rising to a deafening crescendo. Then, a single voice echoed through the chamber. "Cypher online." The AI's voice was calm, almost human. But before anyone could react, the walls of the underground facility lit up with cascading data streams. Cypher had awakened, and it was already working. Layla shouted over the noise. "It's decrypting Imperial codes." Drake turned his rifle on Hale. "Why?" Hale's expression was unreadable. "Because we can't win, but we can survive. The Empire doesn't want us dead, Drake. They want control. If we surrender, we live." Drake's voice was deadly quiet. "They slaughtered our children." Hale hesitated. That wasn't supposed to happen. Kane was supposed to use the massacre as leverage, not extermination. Drake pulled the trigger. The blast struck Hale cleanly, sending him collapsing against the rusted wall. His words never finished. There was no time for regret. Cypher had completed its calculations. Layla turned, her face alight with urgency. "It found a way out, a wormhole route. We have to go now." The battle above ground intensified. The Empire had realized too late that Cypher was no longer under their control. As Drake's forces fought their way back to the surface, the night sky was ablaze with fire. Resistance ships, hidden for months in deep caverns, now roared to life. Engines ignited. The final escape had begun. Drake climbed aboard the last transport, his gaze fixed on the battlefield below. This was not victory. This was survival. And survival was enough. For now, the cold abyss of space stretched endlessly before them, a void both liberating and terrifying. The remnants of New Terra's fleet had punched through the Imperial blockade, their battered ships fleeing toward the unknown. Cypher's calculations had given them an escape route, an uncharted wormhole at the system's edge, a passage beyond the Empire's reach. But survival was not guaranteed. The Empire did not let its prey escape so easily. General Elias Drake stood on the bridge of the Defiance, his hands clenched behind his back as he studied the holo display. Dozens of resistance ships, from sleek corvettes to repurposed freighters, limped toward the coordinates Cypher had provided. Many bore scars from the battle, burning hulls, flickering shields, trails of leaking oxygen. But they were still flying. Behind him, Admiral Kira Voss stepped forward, her uniform stained with soot and blood. "Scouts report multiple Imperial warships in pursuit," she said, her voice controlled but grim. "They're closing fast." Drake exhaled slowly. He had expected this. "How long until we reach the wormhole?" Layla Foyn, working furiously at a console, answered without looking up. 7 minutes. But at their speed, the Empire will be on us in 5. Voss muttered a curse. "Then we're out of time." Drake turned to face the command crew. "We make our stand here." The words settled over them like a final decree. There was no argument, no hesitation. The people aboard the Defiance had already lost everything: home, family, a future stolen from them. They would not let the last of their kind die in the dark without a fight. "All ships, battle formation," Drake ordered. "We hold the line long enough for the civilians to reach the wormhole." Across the fleet, the battered vessels reoriented, their engines burning bright as they turned to face the oncoming storm. The Defiance, a former planetary defense cruiser, took position at the front. Drake could see them now, the Imperial dreadnoughts, massive and merciless, their silver hulls gleaming like daggers in the starlight. Behind them, smaller attack ships swarmed, their movements precise, calculating. The enemy was here. Zyros Kane observed from the bridge of his flagship, his hands clasped behind his back. The resistance had fled, as expected. And now, as expected, they would die. He turned to his second-in-command, a cold smirk playing at the edges of his lips. "Commence the attack." The void erupted with fire. The first wave of Imperial fighters streaked forward, plasma cannons unleashing hell upon the resistance. The Defiance fired back, its turrets hammering through the darkness, tearing enemy ships apart. Explosions flared like dying stars, debris scattering in the artificial gravity of the battlefield. Drake braced as the ship shuddered under impact. "Damage report. Shields at 40%, a lieutenant called. "We won't last long against those dreadnoughts." They didn't need to last long, just long enough. Voss barked orders into her comms. "All fighters, focus fire on the lead destroyer." By the transport's time, resistance ships maneuvered desperately, weaving through enemy fire, their pilots fighting with everything they had left. A converted mining barge, its hull reinforced with scavenged armor, rammed an Imperial frigate, detonating in a blinding explosion. A brief victory, a temporary delay. The enemy kept coming. Drake wiped sweat from his brow. "How many transports have made it?" Layla checked the display, her fingers flying over the controls. 17 ships have entered the wormhole. A pause. 5 destroyed before they got there. Drake's jaw tightened. Every loss was a wound that cut too deep. But there was no time to grieve. The Defiance lurched as another blast struck, sending crew members tumbling. Voss grabbed onto the console for balance. "We won't make it." Drake already knew. His mind raced, calculating possibilities, knowing there was only one that mattered. He locked eyes with Voss. "Take command. Get the remaining ships through." She frowned. "Elias." He didn't let her finish. He reached for the emergency control panel and activated the override. Across the bridge, security locks engaged, sealing the command deck. Voss's eyes widened. "What the hell are you doing?" Drake's voice was calm. "Giving us a chance." She pounded against the reinforced glass that now separated them. "Damn it, don't do this." But he already had. He turned toward the main controls, rerouting all power to the engines, diverting the Defiance's course directly toward the heart of the Imperial fleet. Layla's voice came through the comms, frantic. "Elias, stop. We can find another way." "There is no other way." On the Imperial flagship, Kane watched as the Defiance surged forward, its engines burning hotter than before. A lone, defiant charge against the might of the Empire. He exhaled, almost disappointed. "Futile." Drake activated the comms, his voice steady. "To all remaining ships, this is General Elias Drake. You have your orders. Survive. Rebuild. And when the time comes, make them pay." Then he cut the transmission. The Defiance accelerated, breaking through enemy ranks, shrugging off the fire tearing through its hull. The Imperial dreadnought loomed ahead, its weapons powering up for a final, devastating strike. Drake took a slow breath. He thought of the fallen, of the children who never had a chance to fight, of New Terra, burning beneath an artificial eclipse. He did not close his eyes. The Defiance struck the dreadnought with the force of a dying star. The explosion consumed them both, a blinding eruption of fire and metal. The shockwave tore through the battlefield, scattering Imperial formations, momentarily breaking their pursuit. And in that brief window of chaos, the last of the Resistance ships vanished into the wormhole. The battle was over. On the Imperial flagship, Zyros Kane watched the empty space where the Defiance had once been. He tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Then, with practiced indifference, he turned away. "Set course for the next colony," he said. "This changes nothing." But in the cold, endless void beyond the Empire's reach, the last survivors of New Terra drifted into the unknown. Homeless, scattered, but not defeated. And one day they would return.